Good morning. I am Vasily Tolstoy, the member of the programming committee of the Linux Peters 16 conference. We're at this conference now. I'm talking with this Stephen Hemminger.
Glad to meet
Hi,
you.
Stephen. So the usual question, tell us please who you are, what you're doing, where you're doing it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Stephen Hemminger. I work out of Portland, Oregon for Microsoft, and currently I'm spending most of my time making Linux run better on Microsoft Hyper-V and Azure Cloud. But before that, I did a lot of work in Linux networking at Brocade and Linux Foundation.
Great. So we have the real guy from Microsoft. I don't know, should we have a bodyguard for Stephen?
Actually, I was very surprised. I'm a fairly new Microsoft employee. Microsoft has completely changed. It's a very open company to work for, and I have found no resistance to Linux at Microsoft.
Okay, so you have given two talks on these conferences. So can you tell us what it was about? You can choose the one you like the most.
Well, I really like the buffer bloat talk because I thought this up because I wanted to talk about something that was very dear to the community and a lot of people it involved with. And I also wanted to talk that wasn't all PowerPoint slides, because we all have sat through too many PowerPoint slide presentations, and it's really hard to engage the audience when you're just limited to talking in slides. So I like to do a lot of demonstrations, and came up with the idea of using water as an analogy for the network, and it was really a lot of fun. And I've done this talk several times and got a lot of good feedback, and I keep wanting to do it more.
It was really great. I personally remember that quite a far time ago we found a man page about some traffic shaping thing in FreeBSD, and the explanation, it was quite a fresh thing at that time, the explanation on the man page was like, well, we have this article in Proceedings of la 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 la, and you can imagine the bucket. And actually it was all about the man page, but it was great. The bucket analogy was quite helpful. So it was very, very interesting to see, and it was quite a precise analogy. What is your opinion? What's the most important thing happened in the Linux and open software community in general in the last year or two?
Last year or two?
3 years is prehistoric time already.
Okay. Well, I think the biggest thing is actually no change. And the reason I say that that's the biggest thing is if we are a successful software group of people from different companies that has continued to work together to produce more over time, and it's a very active community of engaged people, and the conflicts are pretty small, and they're limited to small little cases. So it's a really well-working community, and technical innovation just keeps happening, and we don't know where it's going to come from, but it just keeps showing up every year. I don't know what's going to happen next year.
So you definitely don't know, or have some expectations of what will happen next? What's cooking?
Well, you can always tell that by you see the things that people present that aren't actually engaged and widely used yet. But you can't tell what's going to show up, but you can see what just showed up and is going to start to be widely used. So there are a bunch of things that people work on internally at large companies that they're not ready to release. They may tell you that they're coming, but they haven't actually released them, but then when they release them. So, I mentioned as all the cloud providers are all working on bigger things to work at scale, where they make the network faster, able to handle more connections and work smoother. And I guess the biggest thing that's coming is encryption everywhere. And so people are basically encrypting the network, encrypting memory and some of the hardware, encrypting guest storage. So all those things, security is number one, and encryption is one of those solutions that people are using everywhere. So
it's an interesting point of view. And what do you think about the performance of all that? So usually, a person they have a notebook with an encrypted drive,
yeah.
and it affects the boot time drastically.
Well, the way that we all know that hardware gets faster, it doesn't get slower, and hardware gets faster based on what people use it for. So when people have a need, the hardware grows to fit that need. So people making smart network cards are going to do encryption in a network card. People making faster SSDs for laptops are going to have encryption in the SSD. Intel CPUs and ARM CPUs both have encryption instructions in some of the versions now, and they're going to have more in the future. So the hardware is going to grow to be faster based on what the demand is.
It could be like that. So, personally, I like the story about the car emission,
yeah.
which came up to practically zero, and nobody was expecting that. So I guess there were combined mind of people kind of accompanying the encryption thing in performance. And not limiting ourselves to Linux and this narrow part of technical stuff. What interesting technical things, or maybe ideas, or society impact, or geek things you have seen and it touched you or interested you in last time?
Wow, I guess the biggest thing that's touched me is how connected we are all the time. I mean, nobody goes around without their phone in their pocket. Nobody goes around and is not connected to everyone else, at least that they care about. And it fits all of society. My mother is on the internet. My mother sends me email.
Yes.
And
the children, it's expected. The mother is something else.
Yeah. And my daughter's in college, and I get daily things back and forth. And so I think that I really actually appreciate that, because I feel more connected than I did growing up. I feel more connected with my friends, my family, and my environment around me.
Also,
and I think that's a really good thing.
I guess I share this experience with you. We're at the conference now. So what do you think? What's the reason of existence of the conferences? Why they're important?
That's a really good question. I think that people don't realize that a lot of times when we communicate with each other, when we communicate in a written form, we want to have a fully formed idea. We want to have we're so used to school and writing papers and that we want to have something that's fully formed before we communicate it. Whereas when we communicate in person, we have more of an interactive discussion where I can bounce an idea to you saying, well, what if we did this? And you could say, yeah, that would work really well, or that's really stupid, or I did that yesterday and it didn't work. And I think conferences are the best way to resolve that. Plus, it also builds the personal connection. When you have a personal connection with somebody, you understand their background and what they're doing and where they're coming from. And when they come to you with something for a request or some input, whether technical or non-technical, you use that. You use the background knowledge to set the stage of that communication.
Sure. And what conferences can you recommend our listeners and viewers to attend or to listen to materials from?
Well, I really think that whatever you have that's local is the first thing, and then finding what's in your area really helps. It's become such a big thing that everything's very specific. I mean, there are things that are very specific to networking, like the IETF ones. There's the Linux Foundation ones, which are more evolved to Linux in the enterprise and cloud and all those things. I also think a lot of times what people can do is, if they can't go to a conference, everything's videoed nowadays. So a lot of times there are events that I really couldn't afford to go to, but I watched most of the talks afterwards on the videos. So the one in Australia is a good example, where they have a big conference in Australia that runs most of a week. I've only been able to go a few times, but many years I've watched all the videos, and I've gotten a lot of good information just by watching it, even though I couldn't be there.
And the usual personal question: what's the operation system of your computer, of your home one?
Well, I will tell you that we have. I guess I kind of laughed the other day. I counted 6 different computers in my house. I mean, there's the Microsoft laptop, which has Linux running in a VM. There's my personal laptop that has Linux, and right now it's Fedora running Windows in a VM. There's my desktop, which is running Debian, which also has a Windows VM. So I guess I'm kind of a polyglot speaker. I feel like Linux is my native language, but I have to have Windows as the foreign language. And then, you know, there's other things too, like I'm always doing other activities where I want to play a game or something and I have to run on a different thing. And my wife uses Macintosh and my daughter in school uses Macintosh. So, I mean, we're just multilingual.
So, like in the fantasy books, you're the guy who connecting worlds.
Yeah, but I'm also the guy who has...
The one with magic power, connecting worlds.
The trouble with that is that it's not always easy. I'm also at home with that many machines, I'm the IT guy, so I'm required to fix different people's computers. And I'm required to figure out how backup's supposed to work across all those computers. And of course, you know, there's always something that doesn't work quite right. It's never easy.
Nothing works quite well all the time. Thank you, Stephen.
Yep. Thank you.
Goodbye.